Hey guys, Brent Hull. Today, let's talk about the American bungalow. Now, if you watch my Buildings and Brew, you'll see me talk about this, and Gustav Stickley, the Green and Green brothers, Frank Lloyd Wright, they're all part of that whole movement. But you're really talking about a much bigger movement and a much bigger societal thing, more than just architecture. The other thing that's interesting about this style, and the reason why it's kind of uniquely American, is you've seen it come around again. You've seen it show up in new houses with the tapered columns, and it became a real hot style. I would even call it a hot style, 10 years ago. So why? Why did that style come around again? Why did it become popular again? There's two things we've got to remember. If we go back to when the arts and crafts starts and when it comes out of, you're really talking about that, late Victorian period. And the arts and crafts movement is a rejection of the heavy industrialization, the over-ornamentation, the gaudiness of the Victorian era. And so if you've seen some of these Victorian houses that have all this ornamentation all over the place, the arts and crafts is like, ugh, I can't handle this anymore. Now, it goes back to John Ruskin and Pugin, who were British designers and influencers who spoke about how industrialization was kind of stealing our soul, how we had forgotten how to craft, which is funny because we look at buildings from that era and go, they really knew how to craft. Now, they were saying at that time, we've forgotten how to craft. Fast forward, guys, think about AI. Think about some of the other things that are happening in our industry right now and in our society, and you realize that all things repeat itself. There's a great quote. It says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. That's kind of what's happening here. And that's why I think that this is one of those styles that is uniquely American and unique and wonderful. Now, it's one of my probably favorite styles. Why is that? And I think it's the reason why people appreciate it as well. There's a simplicity to it. There's an honesty to it. There is a openness to it. It is not gaudy. It is not pretentious. It is not loud and proud, right? It is homey. It's inviting. It's come sit on my porch. The big front porch on a bungalow house basically oftentimes will extend all across the front of the house. What opening wide arms, that you're being offered there as you're being, hey, come sit on my porch, come relax here. So it comes out of this English movement and this anti-industrialization. So William Morris was part of it. As I said, John Ruskin. John Ruskin was a big proponent of craft and building, and he wrote a number of books. He's very influential. William Morris, okay, and here's the irony, is that when the arts and crafts movement started, it started as a rejection of craft, but as people started crafting and hand making things, it actually became more expensive. An irony there, right? The bungalow style is really defined by, in America, Frank Lloyd Wright, who's kind of part of the Prairie School that came out of Chicago, Gustav Stickley, who was a furniture maker and a designer, and then the Green and Green brothers out in California. They all did kind of the same thing but different. Gustav Stickley was known for the craftsman style, okay? And he had a magazine called The Craftsman. And he, in fact, built up this huge empire he had a 15-story building in New York, was making custom furniture, was doing all these crazy things. And then the market kind of went away for him and literally lost most everything. Kind of a tragic story. And then out in Pasadena, you had the Green brothers doing their great houses in Pasadena. Now, they were influenced by a number of things. In Chicago, the Columbian World Fair, there was a Japanese pagoda on an island there, and it became very influential. Wide overhangs, a lot of timber construction, timbered eaves, simplicity that really inspired both Green and Green and Frank Lloyd Wright. And so you have a number of things coming together that influenced and encouraged this. You have not only a rise in middle class that you see in the Victorian age, but a working class that can now afford things. And so, Fairmount, which is a neighborhood here in Fort Worth, just behind me, one of the largest bungalow districts in the country, it was all filled with working man cottages, okay? There were simple houses made fairly cheaply. You won't believe how much trim there is in those houses today. But, that was inexpensive building back then. And so you have this wonderful honesty, okay? This architecture that comes out and is beautiful, simple, open, encouraging, wonderful. It becomes a very popular style, and it lasts from 1900 into the 1920s. Starting about 1920, kind of spins out and becomes a period revival thing. And so it becomes less popular. So for probably a 20-year period, the bungalows kind of were it. Maybe 1910, 1915, kind of the height of that thing, then it starts falling off. Some of the great things that happen in bungalows is that you typically walk in off a porch into a living room. There's a dining room, then a kitchen behind that. And when we're redoing these houses, we're oftentimes making that kitchen bigger because that was the period of time when the kitchen was a workspace, right? They actually counted steps and did whole studies on people cooking in a kitchen, and a smaller kitchen was actually better, okay, because it was more efficient. But typically had one bathroom, 2 to 3 bedrooms. Typically, they're not 2-story buildings. The amount of woodwork that was in these buildings is actually impressive compared to starter houses you see today that almost have no trim. Tile bathrooms. The kitchen maybe is the thing that we're fixing up the most because it was such a workspace. Typically on a bungalow, we are adding on a family room onto the back because there is no informal living area in that time. That doesn't really happen until the ranch period when we have dens and things like that. Cars were separated, right? This was a time when there was a carriage house and it was separated from the house. The architecture of the house was reflected in the garage most times. And so you see these details in the house and the carriage house speaking to one another. So there's wonderful playfulness that happens that way too. Really, this is the last period of the front porch, right? This is the last period of when you have sidewalks in these neighborhoods where people are walking around. Post-World War II, I guess in the period of our era, there's not really porches because it's like English cottages and different things like that. Sometimes a colonial revival might have a side porch, but the front porch living that happens and is designed around these bungalows, it's really the last little era of that. And so, what do you do back then? I mean, what do you do without Instagram? There's a lot more reading, sitting around a fireplace. Home is happening, right? But you are living along the front of your street. With the advent of the car becoming so important, as we talked about in the ranch period, the houses are attached to the garage now, and just you pull your car in, close your garage door, and you're living in your backyard now. One of the great bungalow period houses, bungalow era houses, is the Gamble House. I've done whole videos on the Gamble House. Charles and Henry Green out in California, they had stopped in Chicago to look at the World's Fair, seen the Japanese pagoda, were inspired by that. They get out there and they get permission to kind of build something special, something different. Because if you look, when that house was built, that it was not a typical house at that time. High levels of craftsmanship. I mean, you think about the front door with all the leaded glass, all that woodwork inside there with the tenons and the pegging and the keys that are holding all that woodwork together. There is an honesty of that material, an expression of that material and how those things all come together. All the lighting and the cloud lift patterns and the screens and all the different things. Of course, in California, weather's mostly perfect, and so that house really works well out there, but that was one where the breeze really opens up. You have sleeping porches. The kitchen is wonderful at the Gamble House. That is probably top 3 houses in America for me. The carriage house is so cool there. So anyway, if we just look at a model for what that era is, I mean, I don't think the Gamble House was built anywhere but in the United States. Now, fast forward, okay, to the things that it influences today is the revival of that craftsman style that became popular 10 or 15 years ago. Now, here's where history's rhyming, okay? Think about the houses that we were building in the 80s and the 90s. McMansions, right? That's when the term is coined, is in the 80s. Starter castles, McMansions, all those different things. Big gaudy houses, okay? Fake materials, fake ornamentation. And so there is a rejection of that around 2000. Of get away from that. I mean, and a return to simplicity and a return to something that's honest and open and isn't showy and isn't over the top. That revival that happened was because we were rejecting the over ornamentation and the silliness. The cottage style became very popular then, Chip and Joanna, and of course this revival of the arts and crafts. So there are bungalows in Australia. There are bungalows in other areas. This was a popular style. A bungalow house was considered just basically any small house. So I've seen in some of these architectural magazines and plan book magazines, a Spanish revival house being called a bungalow, okay? So that idea of just a small house was called a bungalow. But what I'm talking about is the arts and crafts movement. You go inside, stained grade moldings, flat, simple hardware. It is a style that reflects who our country was and what we thought and what we believed. It's a style that we can drive through, and I drive through that neighborhood now. I see all those simple houses, and it just makes me go, oh, I wish we could go back to a simpler time. I wish we didn't have the phones and the other things. It just seems like a easier way to live. I know it's nostalgic. I know I'm being a boomer, as we talk about these 4 styles that are uniquely American, it's got to be up there. It's got to be one of those styles that is mostly uniquely American, is accepted and embraced all over the country at this time. And we can point to that house and go, yes, that is an American house. That's an American style. So the bungalow style, let me know what you guys think. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.